Thank you very much, everyone. And Paul, I just want to tell you that when I was following virtual reality to sustainable management models, I was like, ah, at least it's not after lunch. So yes, Stonehammer has been leading, certainly not delivering the entire project, because we have had wonderful input from all partners of Drifting Apart. The Sustainable Management Models work package. And our goal really was to try and come up with, it actually used to say model, but there is no one model. So I actually took liberty and changed it to models. And I'm going to sort of take us back to where Patrick was this morning about the fundamentals of a geopark. And this is how on the UNESCO Global Geopark website, they incorporate all of the deliverables of a geopark into these 4 bubbles: management, geological heritage, visibility. For me, visibility is more about sustainable economic development, education, interpretation. It's all of those sort of put into that one bubble, and networking. And one of the things I think that's always important, either as a geopark or an aspiring geopark or an area interested in becoming a geopark, is this box right here. Self-evaluation guide. Patrick mentioned it this morning, but it is extremely important when you're developing your geopark, whether it's the management model or any part of the geopark, that you review and know that document well. It is our SWOT, it is our goals, it's our criteria, it's what we're evaluated on. And in Canada, I realized early on in mentoring other geoparks, some of them hadn't even opened the document and were asking me questions. So I made it a rule in Canada, you must have reviewed the self-evaluation guide before you start talking to us about what should you be doing. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up at the very beginning of the presentation today. Because with the sustainable management model, the criteria is outlined what you must have in order to gain your points, right? But I guess what's really important to know is that there isn't one model. And that is because geoparks are based on people, and you have the flexibility to do what you want within your own area. And one of the reasons that it's different is because there's different land ownership, different laws of the land and nations, different funding models, cultural considerations. So you can imagine there couldn't be just one management model. Does that make sense? Cool. So, let's see if this works. Pointed at this. Because we're in Iceland, I thought snowflakes would be a good way to remind you all, no 2 management models are the same. Are there similarities? Absolutely. We all know those are 2 snowflakes. But it's really important to remember, through your best practice and trying to find out what's going to work for you, it's not going to be the exact same, but you're going to be able to pull things from other geoparks and make it your own. And here we go. And sustainable management. Sometimes people start to just glaze over even when I just say the word management, because it is arduous and it is the boring part, but you know what? It's the critical part to your long-term success and sustainability of your geopark. If you don't start with a good management plan, you're probably not going to continue on, because remember, every 4 years you get revalidated. It's not like they come in once, check, gone. You're going to have to make sure that you continue to do this. And the other thing I just want to point out, I know the first time that Stonehammer was revalidated in 2014, one of our evaluators was from China. His geopark received over 7 million visitors a year. We don't have that in Stonehammer. And his thing that he couldn't wrap his head around is, why don't you have a preservation plan in place for this here, whatever, right, fossil? And I'm like, well, I'd like to have that problem. But so best practices are one thing, but always try to make sure it's in your context to what you're doing with your communities and your people. Does that make sense? Again, that's good. I just want to keep saying no 2 are the same. Well, let's get into the management now. UNESCO Global Geoparks basically say single unified area, holistic approach to your management, right? So those are sort of the words that they utilize. I'm going to suggest to you that what you must do is be inclusive of all your stakeholders. Geopark Shetland, I believe later, is going to talk about maybe how to identify those stakeholders in your community. But when you're thinking of starting a geopark, who is going to help shape what your geopark is? I'm going to suggest it's your educators, your tourism business operators, your universities, let's see if I have to go back to my list, researchers, community influencers is sort of a catch-all. I know for us, raising funds and fundraising with either government or corporate, we need people in our community that are vested in Stonehammer and have the ability to turn those keys and doors to get us money. Plain and simple, right? So you want to have community influencers. I said private businesses, right? Doesn't just have to be tourism businesses, it can be other businesses as well. And government. I think that government. Multiple levels of government. No matter what country we live in, we all have multiple levels of government. We might call them something different, but if the government is in your geopark, you need to be engaged with them so they know what you're doing. And do that at the beginning, not at the end. Do it at the beginning. So, I don't know, what are some of the words that jump out at people here when you see this word map? What words speak to you? What jumps out? I'm not going to do all the talking in this talk. You have to be engaged.
Jobs.
Jobs, right. Geoparks are about jobs. Sorry? Finance, very important.
Motivation.
Right? Keep people engaged, keep them motivated.
Human.
Policy, sorry?
Human.
Humans. Geoparks are about humans. Right? So all of these words, folks, are what you're really trying to do when you're developing your sustainable management model. Okay? I'm going to focus on a few. But again, the first thing that you need to do, just a sec. I'm good. The first thing you need to do is decide who your stakeholders are. Who do you need sitting around the table, engaged with your geopark, to be involved in discussions that will help facilitate you to actual designation and beyond for revalidation, right? Not a lifelong membership. So questions you should ask yourself: how many communities are in your proposed boundary? Do you need a representative from each of those communities, or could you maybe have one representative that would look after all the communities? What's your local situation? In Stonehammer, that works for us. In other areas, it doesn't work. They would need one from each. So these are sort of rhetorical questions you need to think about. What about your regional and national representatives? Do they need to be at the table, or do you just need to meet with them once a year? Twice a year? What's going to work for your people in your community? Are you going to offer your own experiences, or are you going to start partnering with local businesses? How are you going to build the experiences for your geopark? How much do you need to engage those private businesses, or are you going to create your own? These are fundamental questions you need to ask before you start to really build that model. Whether you're going to do your own, or whether you're going to partner, how are you going to manage the quality of these experiences? And experiences right now is in the classroom, teaching education, on the field, doing field trips, for your visitors, or at community events. So I'm using experiences in the holistic term, right? So who's going to do that for you? How are you going to communicate? Right? These are all the questions you need to start asking yourself before you get your stakeholders at the table, because that's how you get the right people there. I think I meant this one. Who's going to help raise money? That's all. People are afraid to talk about money sometimes. I know Canadians are. But money is an essential part of being sustainable and successful. So who's going to help you get that money for your geopark? I actually wrote down, who in your community has an impressive Rolodex? I guess in today's term, it's who has the impressive contact list. That sort of dates me. I did have a birthday yesterday. Who owns the land that your geosites will be on? Is it publicly owned? Is it privately owned? Is it a combination? How is it going to be easily accessible? Do they need to be involved? Do you need to have agreements with these folks? So essentially, you need to start asking yourself those questions, write them down, start having conversations, have community meetings, make sure you have the right people with you, and start developing your plan. I always relate this to having the right people on the bus. Think of your geopark as a bus. You want to get the right people on the bus, and you also want to get the right people in the right seat, right? So one thing I often say to aspiring geoparks in Canada, where's Paul? There you go. Do you have a teacher involved? How are you going to deliver educational programming in the classroom if you don't have a teacher fully engaged in your planning and development, especially in the beginning, right? Do you have a tourism operator involved? Do you have a researcher involved? So make sure you have the right people on the bus and that you have them in the right seat. Because I think that's where most people make the mistake in governance. Is you know who in your community are the leaders and you know who can do generally what, but do you put them in the right seat in your organization? Okay? And you can change your mind, right? Just like you get revalidated every 4 years, you can management structure. The other thing I find people get hung up on is getting it right out of the gate, getting it right the first time. You're not. Stonehammer's rewriting our bylaws right now and they're only 5 years old. Organizations evolve and change, so don't get too hung up on making it perfect at the beginning, right? Because you're going to have an opportunity to adjust if you find that that's a need. I said beginning. It's the beginning that you need to engage all these people. So stakeholder engagement is important, but it has to be authentic. Does anyone know Mike Myers? Anyway, senior manager wants your input. You know, I've been invited as a community stakeholder outside of Stonehammer to engagement sessions. It sometimes is pretty obvious that they're really just checking a box. Did we talk to this person? Did we talk to this organization? You want to make sure when you're doing your community engagement, if you want to be sustainable in your management plan, that it's authentic and that you really do want to hear from the people that you're engaging with. So, be like Mike Myers. Make sure you're doing it for genuinely, I guess, is the right reason. I keep pointing at that and I have to point at this. Now, again, so there's no two the same, but I thought it important maybe to run through the kinds of structures that you could potentially have. Hold it, I think I did this one thing. Yep. So, 4 things to take in mind. 2 of them go together and 2 of them go together. They're probably going to be, and I'm sorry if these aren't internationally translatable terms, and if they're not, please raise your hand and I'll explain them more. Is that fair? But you're either going to be a for-profit organization, which means that you are going to make money to give to your shareholders or your stakeholders. For-profit. Or you're going to be not-for-profit. I gotta move. Not-for-profit means you're still probably going to make some money, right? But you're going to invest it back into your deliverables. That's what Stonehammer is. We're a not-for-profit organization. Any money we bring in goes back into delivering our programming, right? So that's either for-profit or you're not-for-profit. Just remember, not-for-profit doesn't mean you don't make money. It's just how you disperse the profits. They stay within your organization. So then you have to decide if you're going to be a private organization or a public organization. Public means you live within the government. You're a department of a government agency, right? Public. Or you're going to be private, which means that you are managed by non-government rules. Try not to be too technical, right? So that would be private. So Stonehammer is a not-for-profit, private entity. We don't live within a government agency. If you go to China, most of the geoparks in China are public, right? They're within the department of the government. That's just a broad statement. I think all of them are. So what's going to work in your landscape? Where is best for your organization to live and breathe and grow? You have to decide between those 4. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. So again, like I said, there's many different ways to do it, but remember I said you're putting the right people on the bus, making sure the right people are in the seat? Who's going to drive the bus? That's your next biggest question. And whether you're public or private, that sometimes answers that question for you, right? So we are a private organization, so we have a board of directors at Stonehammer. If you were a public organization, it could be the minister of something, for example, right? So who's the boss? Who's the final accountability mechanism within your organization? So what I know best is the private, not-for-profit. So we have a board of directors that are formed with those stakeholders in mind. So education, sustainable economic development, research, finance, all that good stuff, right? And then there's staff. Wanda Hughes is here with me. She delivers, her and her team deliver all of educational programming in the community. So there's herself and myself, and we also have volunteers. But I do want to freak people out. But you can also have volunteers here up to the side. And then, oh, wrong way. Back. And these are subcommittees. I don't know how well you can see that, sorry, but I just sort of went with the main deliverables. You want to have a committee on education, you're going to want to have a committee on management, sustainable development, preservation and conservation. It's going to be different in every geopark where you start. And your committees are going to evolve and change over time as well, right? Because you'll get really good at something, and then maybe just staff can take it on. You don't necessarily need that input. You're going to need that every 4 years when you get revalidated. Double check on that, which is a good thing, right? These are some examples, and I mean, then who are you going to work with? So in education, public schools, universities, local community, right? So this is sort of building your structure. Right people in the right bubbles, with right people in the right seats. Question? Staff. Question? Yes?
Are they staff committees or boards?
So that's really up to the organization. It's usually always good to have one board member on every committee. And actually that's what I was just going to run through, to be honest with you. So I can tell you, and I'll just give you Stonehammer's perspective if that's fair. So we have a standing finance committee. So the treasurer is always on our finance committee. Kind of makes sense, right? And actually for Stonehammer, the entire executive is on it. So your finance committee should be a standing committee. You should always have it. Without money, you can't survive, right? We also have a marketing committee, which currently really is just me and the destination marketing organization who sits on our board provides me feedback. Now, when I'm doing marketing, I always go out to all my stakeholders with the plan. They give feedback, and then we sort of run with it. My background is tourism. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning, so I'm okay with that one. Education. We actually don't have an education committee anymore because we're rocking it in K-12. We've built right relationships with other educators. All the schools within our footprint know how to reach us. But when you start your geopark, you're definitely going to want to have a teacher. We still have a retired teacher on our board, actually. And that should be a standing committee to make sure that you're current with your curriculum. Curriculum is different throughout the world. I know in New Brunswick, if we are not providing programming that helps teachers elevate their outcomes, they won't talk to us. So we have to stay current with the educational deliverables. Strategic planning, remember the 4-year revalidation? So we have a strategic planning. It's not a standing committee, it evolves. We get it revalidated this year, so we will evolve and start that committee again in the fall to review the recommendations that we receive from our revalidation and set a 4-year plan. 4-year plans for geoparks are probably a pretty good idea because you get evaluated every 4 years. So you want to make sure, and that's a really good place, the strategic planning committee is a really good place to bring new people into your management structure. Because you can get very insular. Do you know insular? You can get very, you just work and play in your own little world, and you don't look at things through the right lens, perhaps. So if you bring somebody from outside your organization at the strategic planning session, they can help you see things that you might not see. And it's also a great way to build capacity to replace people within the organization. Cultural connections or community connections, however you want to sort of frame that up. Having a standing committee that engages your different community members, be it by indigenous or by location or however works for you. It's good to have a community or cultural committee because it allows your community members to remember that a geopark was built from the bottom up and that you're always going to be going back to them for check-ins, where are things at, that kind of thing. Make sense? Now, some of us live in very small populated areas. So if you aren't able to have a board member on all of your committees, that's okay, right? What you always want to do is make sure that information and communication is flowing and that these folks up here know what these folks down here are doing, right? So communication is key in any management structure, up and down, all around, that kind of stuff. Cool? Okay. So, as part of your management plan for a geopark, you have to have a very detailed site infrastructure and development plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this today, but I am going to give you some examples of how you may or may not be able to do this. And taking the time to do this at the beginning of the development of your geopark, I can't stress how important it is. And to think about not just what you want to have included in your geopark the first time that you apply, but for your growth. And so for example, in Stonehammer, we have over 250 geologically significant sites within our footprint. Of those, 60 can be developed for public access. Currently, we promote 14 of those. But in our original application to UNESCO, we included the 60, right? Because it showed that we had an opportunity to grow. And as funds or situations change, we may want to add those in, right? So I have a really good idea what our growth plan is. So if a city councilor is to come to me and say, hey gal, we have some money and we'd like to develop another site for Stonehammer, my immediate words are Seaside Park. Because I can do this, this, and this there, and I can tell this story which connects to the story over here. So be ready for the development. So when you start your geopark, and things will change. You can add things. Doesn't mean you can't add things once you've written your first plan. But if you can be as inclusive as possible at the beginning, it's your path for development. And one thing I haven't really said yet, and I should have, is, and Patrick said it this morning, is geoparks are more than the rocks. Remember to catalog your people stories. Remember to catalog your intangible heritage stories, which I think are your people stories. But people sometimes put them separate, right? So remember it's nature, culture, and geology. So I do have to look at my notes for this. So how we have done our itemized inventory is every geosite has a number, because it's easy to refer to later on, right? So give them all a number. The name of the geosite, that would be its actual name, not some sort of fancy marketing name, but the actual name of the geosite. The longs and the lats. How many times, Andrew, have you asked me for the longitude and latitude of something? I didn't have to go find it, I had it. Just saying, right? Who owns the land? Right? Again, development, future. Is it, obviously public land is probably more easy to develop than private. What's the significance of the geosite? Is it local, national, international? Because your geopark has to have internationally significant geology. So, and you'll be asked on that self-evaluation document, how many of your geosites have that? I have a catalog. I know it. What are you going to use the geosite for? Tourism? Research? Limited access for preservation and conservation reasons? Who can go there? When they go there, what are they going to be able to do? Guided and interpretive only? Or can they go there on their own? Are there safety issues? Train tracks, for example, is a big one where I come from. And then future considerations in development. Okay? If you have those things, then you've got a good solid start to your plan for management of your actual geosites, which are all your different locations in your geopark. All right, so now you've got the right people on the bus, in the right seat, you got the driver, you know the sites you want to promote. What do you do now? Anyone have a child under the age of 12? Anyone know what that is? It's Minecraft. And in Minecraft, they teach you to build your structures solidly from the bottom up. You can't really put a block up here, because what's it going to do? Crash. My daughter plays Minecraft, so I thought someone would relate to that. So how do you build your pillars successfully? How am I doing for time? Am I good? Okay. Here. Oh, now it's going to go too fast. So geological heritage. So you have to tell the stories of your geological heritage. So when you're building your geological heritage, that's been talked about a lot today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But here's the one thing that I'll add. Theming. It's important from an educational perspective, as well as a tourism perspective, to try to create common themes amongst your geopark. And Kirsten said it, make sure it's easily understood by everyone, right? So tectonic plates, no. Colliding continents, yes, right? So start to build your geological heritage interpretation and assets, remembering most people are like me. I actually now know what tectonic plate movement means, but 10 years ago I had no idea. And if I started to read a signboard that said tectonic plates, guess what I would have done? I would have walked away, right? But colliding continents, I'm like, what? I'm all over that. How did that happen, right? So just make sure that when you're building your geological heritage, you can remember that you're speaking to 94% of the world, I think the figure is. One thing I will ask, interpretation, again, Marble Arch did a wonderful job speaking about this morning, but I can't not have it here because it's a critical point of your management plan. How are you going to develop your interpretation? Are you going to have signboards everywhere? Are you going to have what I call useful interpretation? The bench, people need to sit down. Put some interpretation on that. Are you going to do GeoVR and have your students? I'm so excited, by the way, to have our students in Canada be able to visit Russia. How cool is that, right? There's a lot of kids that are never going to go to Russia, and now they can. The Geopark movement did that, right? So think about your interpretation. What's going to have the best impact for your community and for your visitors? And then read what Marble Arch Caves wrote in their best parts. Best practices for interpretation. Okay, I've talked enough. Marble Arch showed some of the examples that Drifting Apart partners have done. We have a lot of cool people in this room. I want to hear some of the wins that you've had in interpreting. It's not geology, that's okay. Interpretation is about telling a story. Does anyone have a good example of a success story in your area of telling a story? Go ahead, thank you.
We use people all the time, so our guided tours of the causeway,
Yes.
and telling the story of Finn McCool, the giant, and the geological processes, and that is by far what we get the best interaction and feedback from. Obviously, with 1 million people going through, we can't have everybody going on a guided tour. We can take as many as possible, so we have audio guides as well.
Oh,
We try to
fantastic.
do them in as many different languages as possible. So still getting that human touch into everything we try and do is
That's
the best success we have.
Did everyone hear that?
No.
Human touch. Those are the best words that you said right there. I mean, it is about that. When we think of ourselves as travelers and visitors, that's what we want to do, is we want to connect with the local people, right? And your community members, they want to do the same thing. We're becoming a very isolated society with our phones, right? So even in your own community, being able to connect with somebody else is so important. So yes, guided interpretive tours and or audio is a fantastic idea. Go ahead.
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
in the landscape partnership that is working very close to the Giants Causeway, we have run a series of tour guiding courses. So we've been developing fully trained tour guides.
Yeah.
And this has been hugely successful. Nearly all the people who have been through that course have now set themselves up professionally and are now working full-time doing that, having been just interested in it. But they're also finding that their businesses are expanding, and they need more tour guides to fulfill their business, but they're not prepared to take on anybody who hasn't done the course themselves.
Fantastic.
Because the difference between a trained tour guide and an untrained tour guide is an enormous gulf and a gap, and they just simply need to have that training. So
Couldn't agree more.
tour
yes.
guides, great, but trained tour guides, 100% better, straight out.
Quality assurance is something I think that's definitely got to be part of a management plan. I do speak to that later, so thank you for bringing that up. Alexandra?
In the Geological National Park, we have schools for young guides. So local children from different villages, they're making excursions for the tourists, and they're telling about their heritage and about the nature of the area. So it's very important, I think, to involve in this activity local children also. So they might be future guides in our national park or in our future geopark.
Teach them young. I love that. That's fantastic. I remember seeing that when I was there. Thank you. This is what this is about. This is what Global Geoparks, UNESCO Global Geoparks, are about. Oh, sorry, Graham.
Can I
Yes.
add something?
Yes.
When we were developing the new visitor centre at the Giants Causeway, it coincided with the release of a film called Men in Black 3. Does anybody remember Men in Black 3?
Love it.
Well, it was reviewed by a man called Mark Kermode, who's a British, English reviewer. He actually goes to West Davis, Shetland. He curates the Shetland Film Festival every year, and he described the film Men in Black 3 as whelming. It's a made-up word. There's a word called overwhelming, which means on top of it. Underwhelming, which doesn't meet requirements, but whelming. At the Giants Causeway, when we were opening the visitor centre, that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted something which was not going to take away from the amazing place that is the Causeway.
Right.
And we wanted something which wasn't going to be disappointing to people. It just had to be at the right level. But all that everybody was talking about, the people side of things, the interpretation that our colleagues from Fermanagh were talking about earlier on, what you've been talking about, Gail, needs to be sort of subsidiary to the wonders of geology that we have.
Right. Don't overtake it. I absolutely agree. Thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't see you. Hiding in the corner. So this, as I was going to say, is what UNESCO Global Geoparks are about. It's about collaboration. It's about sharing what works and what doesn't with each other. And that's why I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to give examples as we go through this, okay? So speak up. So next is environmental education. And drifting apart, someone's going to speak to this afternoon, so I'm not going to steal your thunder, I promise. However, as part of your sustainable management plan, it's a huge deliverable. So you need to make sure, what? Someone say it. You have the right person on the bus, driving your educational silo. I call them silos, okay, for deliverable. You need a teacher, right? And you need someone that can tell you what the outcomes are in their classroom at the various touch points. In New Brunswick, it's grade 4, 7, and high school that they have earth science outcomes. And geoparks are cross-curriculum. That's what's so exciting, especially when you get to the high school level. You don't just have to be going into the geography courses or you could be going into any of the like outdoor pursuits, and you can be taking them on field trips, so you can really get creative with how you get your young people, because for me it's about that, excited about their own backyard. I don't know about anyone else, but a lot of rural areas have a huge problem with our young people leaving for the bigger centers. No better way than to get them passionate and excited about what's in their own backyard than to show them what they have, right? So for me, while tourism is my background, the education that we do within Stonehammer warms my heart. And if ever I'm having a bad day, I play this video of kids learning about Stonehammer and geology in a classroom, and the smiles on their faces. So be driven by that, right? Because what I'm trying to get across to you is that sustainable management models, boring. But it's key and critical to get it right so that you can do these great deliverables for your community, right? And your visitors. So education, anyone have a good example of either doing public, like K to 12, that's what we call it in Canada, but public school interpretation, field trips, community stuff? Anyone got a good idea? Yes, Kirsten.
Yeah, so at Marble Arts we run quite a lot of education activities, but one of the most successful is our Science Week.
Science Week.
And the reason why it's so successful is not just because we get to bring children in to learn about our science, but we get to bring them in from both sides of the border.
Ah,
They're
yes.
from Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and they don't usually get the opportunity to do that. So it's a part of it talking about peace and also about our science, bringing them all together. So
Breaking down barriers.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. At home, anyone that was in Stonehammer, we refer to an area as the Reversing Falls. It's where our big colliding common story is. And someone said to me about 3 years ago, you know there are kids that have not crossed that bridge and been out of their own little backyard. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true, right? And for me, it was a real checkpoint as to what we should be doing with our programming for our kids, right? We can't just be going to their classrooms, we need to get them out. So yeah, that's fantastic. I can take another one, Andrew.
We ran 3 batches of teacher training now, where we've actually brought teachers out of the classroom, right from primary school age through to age 18 where they go off to university, but
Right.
brought teachers out and given the very basics in terms of geology and the associated geography. But then actually let them put the programs together and help each other. So
Yes.
one of the best moments for me in the Dr. Park project was a special needs teacher from Lamavati
Right.
who worked out that she could take her school group into just a graveyard and look at the different materials that were in the churchyard, either in the church building, the headstones, but use those to try and explain and explore the story.
Right.
So just one of the best experiences I've had.
Yeah. And it's easily accessible, right? And right in their backyard. That's wonderful. So it's possible. It's easily done. An important part of your management plan. Who do you need to have driving that seat bus in the beginning? A teacher, an educator. Sustainable economic development. This is where I love. Anyway, these are the 17 sustainable goals of UNESCO by 2030. And geoparks can have an influence on many of these. And I encourage you all to, you don't have to write them down now. We'll get this somewhere so you can get it later. But if you just go to the UNESCO or the UNESCO website and go to sustainable, it's right there. And sustainable economic development is one of the 17. As we've said many times now, geoparks are typically in remote rural areas, and being able to provide an opportunity for people to stay, work, live, and play in their own communities is a great thing that geoparks can do. Sorry, just take 1 sec. A lot of people are just referring to this as geotourism, but many areas also sell local products. We saw the Cliff and Burns food trail. Did I get that right? And then I know there's cooperatives in many countries for women. That need to have some employment. So it's not always about tourism, it can also be about developing products for sale, be they consumable products. But for me, I'm going to really talk about sustainable economic development, because it's one thing in Stonehammer that I think we've done a pretty good job at engaging private business owners in providing experiences that are fun, right? People are on vacation, they do want to learn, but they want to have fun while they're doing it. And you have to, again, make it easily understandable for people. So I don't talk about plate tectonics, it's colliding continents. I don't talk about failed rift, we talk about the birth of an ocean, right? Which is one of our stories for drifting apart. So try to make it, I'm going to use the word sexy. Your marketing has to be sexy. You need to lure them in and then teach them a little bit, spark their curiosity, and they'll go and learn more. And it'll lead to some of these other goals of UNESCO, like care of the earth and all that entails with climate change and other things, right? Get people excited, hook them, teach them a little, spark their curiosity, and off they'll go and learn more is really what we try to do at Stonehammer. There is also a tourism toolkit. Had another presentation we'll talk about again later. So again, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. But as you can see, what is in every one of these pictures? People. Landscapes are beautiful and breathtaking, absolutely, but from a marketing perspective, people. People need to be able to see themselves there, right? So that's my little tip for the day. And I do encourage you to look at the tourism toolkit. It'll show you how or guide you in engaging local businesses in your area or creating your own, whatever your model's going to be. Visibility was one of our fundamentals. There are so many things when you do that self-evaluation review on that guide. There's a lot of requirements as a geopark. It reminds me of something I forgot to tell you about staff. I'll get back to that. There's a lot of requirements as a geopark. You need to have a pamphlet that pulls your whole area together, right? It can be as simple as a brochure, it can be as complicated as a field guide. Plan that out. When you're a new geopark, a pamphlet's probably okay, but you've got to be growing to the larger deliverable, like a field guide or something. Online booking, becoming really popular. We launched it 2 years ago now in Stonehammer. There were some challenges, not gonna lie, but I think we've worked at a lot of those tweaks, and we're hoping that this year it just goes off by gangbusters. People can book hotels online pretty easily, but it's hard to book a kayaker experience in most of the rural areas. Social media, something I'm hoping that UNESCO, the guidelines might change a little bit. They talk about media releases, which are cool, and yes, you have to do traditional media, but in today's environment, this is really important. And a mistake I find that people make is they try to do all of them at once. No. Your content needs to be relevant. It needs to be interactive. There are stats now that videos are really all people stop and look at when they're going through the social media feed. So take the time in your management plan to think about how you're going to communicate to your different audiences. You've got your visitors, where are your visitors coming from? You've got your community. You've got potential funders. You've got other geoparks, right? So think about who you've got to speak to and decide how best to reach them. Maybe this is silly, but I've learned that sometimes when you think something is silly, it's still worthwhile sharing. Website. Your website should absolutely have the following navigation bars. Okay? Obviously about the geopark, and you should have a map. It's a little pet peeve of mine. Go with your silos. What do you do in education? What are you doing in preservation and conservation? And you should also have one that promotes all the other UNESCO Global Geoparks, right? There should be a direct link for that. And then one that goes out to your social media channels. And then you can have other, but those are the bare minimum that you need to have. And your tourism experiences, I don't think I said that. Cool. Does anyone have a really good sustainable economic development story to share? I do. We have a new operator opening in Stonehammer this June? Timbertop Adventures. He's going to have rope courses and zip lines and like monkeys in the tree, imagine, right? Kids running around, all that kind of stuff. He is now already an operator of Stonehammer, right? Last year we had a major attraction open, Skywalk. They are an operator with Stonehammer. So while Stonehammer doesn't own or operate anything, and it's always challenging for me to demonstrate our economic impact to funders, those are two really good indicators that we're doing something right. If you have new businesses opening and they automatically become part of your organization. Because I know for management models, I get a lot of notes about, what's the economic impact? And I know Patrick showed some numbers this morning from, was that Portugal? And I know the UK has done a study. In North America, it's really hard. Our models are very different. And to be able to point to what brought that visitor to that door, to that cash register, because it's not the door that matters, it's the cash register, is really challenging. So you need to be smart in your management plan and think of other ways to prove your worth, for lack of a better term, prove your return on the investment that your funders are making. So I'll share that with you from a sustainable economic. Anyone else have a story to share?
We have an example, maybe not so good. For the Geopark project, we tried to do or set up geology boat tours, and we were very successful, and they were popular, and there's an interesting definite market there. But because we tested it first and realised there was a market, the operators became reliant on us then to come and deliver the content. So if we were doing it now, we would approach it in a slightly different way. So something in a way it was nearly too successful. They became to rely on us.
Managing the expectations of the boat owners and how they were going to move forward with this great new product. Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Managing expectations and communication kind of go hand in hand sometimes. But yeah, no. Going in with new ventures, make sure the priorities are clear. That's happened to us in education actually in Stonehammer. Right? We always thought that we would just walk in, deliver a program, teacher would know it, we'd be gone. Teacher wants us to keep coming back, which plays heavily on our capacity issue, if you can imagine, right? So we've used volunteers to sort of address that. So careful what you promise, because you're gonna have to keep delivering it. We're good? I'm still good? Okay. Finally, and a little bit has been said about this, but I'm going to say a bit more if that's fair. Networking is a requirement of UNESCO Global Geoparks. And for Stonehammer, it has been huge in our growth, in our sustainability, in everything, and our best practices. The wooden bench that they showed, I may have stolen that from the Causeway Coast, right? And I'm sure you're going to see those little things going up soon too in Stonehammer, right? Like, it's hard to know where to go sometimes with your development, and the best place to look is to others. And networking does that for you. It can also bring in funds. Drifting Apart brought in funds to our geopark. Yes, the first level controller makes us work for them, but we do have funds, right? So that's a win for our governments at home as well, right? The Global Geopark Network meets twice a year. No, the opposite. They meet every 2 years. You should go. If you're an aspiring geopark, thinking about it, best place to go. The EGN, this one, European Geopark Network, they meet every other year. And then you guys also meet other times too, for like business, right? So if you're part of the European Geopark Network, I think you go twice. For someone like ourselves that aren't, we go every other year. So we're always every year going and meeting colleagues and building relationships. It's a sales cycle. I'm just gonna call it what it is. You get to know people, you know you wanna do business with them. Being in person and making those connections is the only way you're really gonna get there. Skype and phones are great, in person always works. Then the Asia Pacific Network, China is very, very keen on establishing relationships with non-Asian geoparks. We have 2 sister relationships in Stonehammer that are growing. Our website actually is now available in Chinese, still being tested, but we have gone live with it because we've been working on it for about 8 months. Can you imagine if 0.001% of the Chinese population came to Stonehammer? Then I would have preservation and conservation issues, right? So I mean, use the network. And use is not a bad word. People are afraid to talk about money, people are afraid to talk about using. It's a good thing. Work with each other and build relationships. So just because they're in Asia, doesn't mean you leave them out. That's my point there. And then Latin America and Caribbean just formed, had their first meeting in January. There's that one. And yes, Canada and North America, we're going to do something eventually. No secret about our friends to the south, but yeah, there are aspiring geoparks in the U.S. who have been engaging with Canada since the beginning, and will continue to do that. When the time is right, I am sure they'll have their first geopark as well. So there's lots of ways to connect. The other things to remember when you're building your geopark, your National Commission for UNESCO, and most countries have a National Geopark Committee of some kind, right? Because think about it, you're building blocks. So, you might not want to start at the Global Geopark Network, you're probably going to want to start regionally. Now, is there other geoparks in your region that you could be connected with? Your National Commission for UNESCO, and your National Committee for Geoparks can direct you to the right place. Invaluable, right? So what is there no two same of? What is not the same? Management plan and snowflakes.
And geoparks.
And geoparks, that's right. And what's most important when you're building your management plan? Yes, get the right people on the bus. It really is key, because if you have the right people on the bus, they will have the knowledge that you need to build a sustainable geopark. And I keep doing it. Oh, that's my last thought. The last thought I leave you with is that we've talked about building it, right? As best I could. This is something we often forget, although revalidation allows us to do it. That's one thing I write those reports in January. It did make me evaluate. Just because you start something doesn't mean you have to finish it. And something could be a maybe. And in the evaluation, you spoke about quality assurance before. We're managing a brand. UNESCO Global Geoparks is a brand. And we're managing it. So if you're not doing your job, you affect me, right? And vice versa, of course, right? So you need to make sure you're always evaluating all of your deliverables. And I will leave you with that unless anyone has any questions. All right, thank you.